Well, I've been a member of the Australian Labor Party for 57 years. I was elected to the New South Wales Legislative Assembly for the state seat of Albany in 1988, retiring because of ill health in 2001. During that time, I chaired a number of parliamentary committees. The most important was a period when I was a member of the Joint Parliamentary Committee of the Independent Commission Against Corruption. From 1995 to 1999, I chaired that committee, and I had a full and detailed working knowledge of how the ICAC during that period of time worked. I was chairman of the International Anti-Corruption Conference World Council from 1995 to 1998. Therefore, I had also a wide experience in anti-corruption internationally. The ICAC was a body that was created to counter corruption in the British colony of Hong Kong and also the islands attached to it, which is Kowloon. That body was very extensive in its powers and still exists today. However, the history of the ICAC that people don't know is that under the Weimar Republic in Germany, from 1923 to 1924, the Berlin Legislative Assembly had views about the extensive corruption during that period of economic turmoil in Germany. So they formed an organisation, an anti-corruption organisation, to fight corruption in the state of Berlin. During that time, they had extensive and very draconian powers to break the back of corruption in the local council. So they proceeded to do that. But unfortunately for the world, as we now know, in 1933, this gentleman came, if I can use that word loosely, Adolf Hitler, and he decided that he would take those draconian powers belonging to the anti-corruption body in Berlin, and he would extend them into what became the Gestapo. When I was doing some research, I discovered to my amazement that the powers that the Hong Kong ICAC had, as well as the power to arrest and imprison, came based upon those powers that were in Berlin in 1923 to 1933. We had a premier, his name was Nick Greiner, who defeated Barry Unsworth after Neville Wren retired, and he decided that he wanted to wreak a little vengeance and also to rout out what he conceived to be the corruption in the Australian Labor Party's government. And so when upon his election, he and one of his advisors decided that they would take the Hong Kong model of the ICAC and that they would use that model to incorporate their own independent commission against corruption. So in 1988, just after I got elected, a bill came before the Parliament when Nick Greiner was the Premier, which said that this will be the bill that would create the Independent Commission Against Corruption. So that bill was introduced to the House. Now, that bill had two extra components of it that didn't have the components out of Hong Kong. One was it gave people the extreme powers to hold private, on oath, inquiries in secret. Now, that wasn't so bad as far as I was concerned, that it didn't affect people's reputations. But it also had the power then to have public inquiries. Of course, the ICAC got these powers, but the one thing about giving such enormous powers to an unelected and a body that would have no accountability except for the Joint Parliamentary Committee of the ICAC, of which I chaired and I was a member for a long time, was that it really could do anything it wanted to do. It could say whatever it wanted to say. And of course it had the media, because everyone loves a scandal. And in those scandals, a lot of it wasn't relevant to what the ICAC was doing. But what it did do, it brought in all this extraneous information which just discredited the poor victim of the ICAC. And then after the whole inquiry is over, if that poor victim was found not to be corrupt, it didn't really matter. Not only was that person's reputation destroyed, that person financially was destroyed because he needed lawyers to go and defend himself. It stems from the Berlin Weimar Republic corruption legislation, which then went to the Gestapo, which then could go to people's homes, drag them out at night, falsely accuse them, and next thing you know, they're in prison camps, as was said at the Nuremberg trials. Well, the function was, we found people, this is what the Nazis were saying, we found people who were anti-us, like communists, other subversives, so we took them in protective custody so they wouldn't cause us any problems. The ICAC now wants not only to be the investigative body, it wants to be the body that prosecutes you. So instead of having an independent body such as the Director of Public Prosecutions overseeing the prosecution of a person who's alleged to have breached the ICAC Act or alleged to be corrupt, now it is the ICAC can do it all themselves. That is a real infringement of democracy. Well, I say it's outrageous, because you need an independent body to be able to look at the evidence given by the ICAC, because most of the evidence given by the ICAC is hearsay upon hearsay upon hearsay. Well, I mean, you even had an ICA commissioner saying, being the commissioner of the ICAC, you had so much power, it's like pulling wings of a butterfly. There are no rules of evidence applying to the ICAC. If you go to court, there are rules of evidence that apply. Hearsay upon hearsay upon hearsay can't be used. The resolution of the ICAC problem is this: the ICAC commissioner should never conduct an inquiry. He's too close, or she is too close to the action. There should be always an independent person, preferably a retired Supreme Court Justice, who would run the inquiry independently and look at the evidence and deal with it. It is a star chamber, but it was set up to be a star chamber. No surprise, it was always set up to be a star chamber. It was always set up to carry out an investigation by interrogating the person who, what they call the person of interest, with no rules of evidence. There was one particular case that I fought on and off about 9 weeks in relation to a person, and that person had against her a lot of very powerful men indeed. Those men had been coached by an unscrupulous barrister who is well known at the bar, and the allegation was that this particular person had forged the signatures of these important men. This would have made this particular person who's alleged to have done this one of the greatest forgers in the history of Australia. Now, we had a handwriting expert who came down and he investigated. I got all their documents, these particular men, their license, their car licenses, documents going back for the years that the law involved, things, their handwriting. Down came the handwriting expert for us, and he said 99% certainty that these people, right, had actually signed these particular documents. But didn't matter. This woman this person was convicted of the charge of fraud.